Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place that smells like boiled wool, singed hair, and cloves. The floor is sticky with old wine and stranger fluids, and a man in a blood-speckled apron is waving you over with a razor in one hand and a dried frog in the other. Welcome to your medieval haircut. But this isn't just about trimming split ends. No, tonight's trim includes a side of minor surgery, a prayer to Saint Dymphna, and possibly, if you're lucky, a hole drilled into your skull. Because tonight, you're not just any medieval villager. You're someone who's been acting strange, muttering to yourself, laughing at birds, waking up on rooftops. So they bring you to the local barber not to look your best, but to feel your best, or rather, to be less possessed. And honestly, you probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history club stretches across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the barber-surgeons shop just after dawn. It's a squat, half-timber-bird building that smells like rosemary and rendered fat. A sign swings above the doorway, a pole painted red and white, twisted like a candy cane. It's not just decoration, it's a literal advertisement for bloodletting. Inside, you hear metal clinking, water bubbling, and someone softly humming a hymn. The walls are lined with implements, blades, bowls, clamps, spikes, bone, sawzall, of them freshly wiped. None of them exactly clean. The barber greets you with a grin that says he's seen worse. And he has. Because in this town, barbers are everything: hairdresser, dentist, surgeon, and most important for you, tonight mind, mender, you sit. Not by choice, but because two stout assistants nudge you down. You feel the coarse linen strap across your chest as the barber leans close, inspecting your pupils, sniffing your breath, and oddly gently tugging your earlobe. Diagnosis begins. He declares that your madness is mild but concerning. You've been seen talking to your own shadow and eating beeswax. Some say you're cursed. Others say you've simply read too much scripture. But the barber says it's your spirits, not ghosts, bodily spirits. Your inner essences. They're misbehaving, rising when they should fall, falling when they should rise. He nods solemnly and opens his leather pouch. You spot the usual: razors, combs, shears, but also some extras: a length of red ribbon, hooked needle, a pouch of crushed herbs that smells like burnt toast. There's also a tiny tin vial that he opens briefly to sniff. He recoils instantly and seals it tight again. Probably powdered boar's tooth or dried goat brain. Possibly both. He dabs your forehead with rose water and sets to work. The first treatment, a symbolic cleansing. He trims your hair short, then shaves your head entirely. It's not just hygienic. There's a belief that hair can trap noxious vapors and even evil thoughts. Removing it might help your mind breathe. Also, it makes it easier to apply poultices or make small incisions. A bowl of tepid vinegar is brought forward. Into it, he stirs ashes, mint, and crushed garlic. You can taste it before it even touches your skin. With a coarse cloth, he rubs the mixture into your scalp until it tingles. Or maybe that's just the fear. He mutters a few words, half Latin, half something older. You catch phrases like melancholia, miasma, and purificatio. Your Mouth goes dry. Then he brings out a mirror. Not to let you admire yourself. No, this is for him to study your reflection. You see, some believe that madness distorts the soul and that distortion shows in mirrored glass. He squats. You look the same to you. He frowns. That might be worse. Now comes the pulse check. He places 2 fingers on your wrist, counts silently, then hums. Your pulse is fast and hot, he says. That's not good. He pulls out a small scrap of parchment and consults a chart of humors. Black bile, yellow bile, blood, phlegm. It's always one of them. He settles on black bile. Classic melancholia. Too much of it, and the mind turns inward, heavy, sad, unstable. You, my friend, are full of shadows, but don't worry, he's got a cure for that. He gestures toward a small wooden chair near the hearth. The assistants help. You sit. The barber ties a strip of cloth around your upper arm, then pricks a vein near your elbow with a small iron lancet. Warm blood trickles out into a ceramic bowl. You feel faint. He tells you that's a good sign. Your brain will lighten, he promises. That single quotes as ... not how brains work. But you don't argue. Outside, a rooster crows. Inside, the bloodletting continues. After a few ounces, he stops the flow with a patch of wool soaked in vinegar and ash. He tapes it in place with old parchment and a prayer. You're handed a cup of barley water laced with fennel and poppy, to ease the spirits, he says. You drink, and everything tastes like warm pepper. Somewhere behind you, a cat hisses. Someone drops a bowl. The barber doesn't flinch. He's already preparing the next stage, and it involves your head again, not the inside yet but the skin just above your temples. A gentle massage with oil of marjoram, believed to chase away dark thoughts and invite clarity. He hums again, a lullaby oddly. The room grows warmer. You realize you're not just getting a haircut tonight. You're getting a full spiritual retuning, whether you like it or not. And this is only the beginning. Historians still argue whether barbers truly believed in their power to heal minds or whether it was just a convenient extension of their bloody business. But either way, you're in the chair now, and the next part involves a small, sharp spoon. The spoon is smaller than you'd imagined. Carved from horn, its edges are slightly chipped, and it smells faintly of camphor and something like smoked eel. The barber calls it a scooping ladle, though it's clearly never been near soup. You try not to stare as he holds it up to the light, inspecting the curve with reverence, then places it beside a thin metal spike that looks suspiciously like a repurposed knitting needle. You've had your head shaved, your blood drawn, and your pulse condemned. Now the real fun begins. The barber opens his pouch again, humming as he lays out more items like he's setting up a tea service. Except instead of saucers and sugar cubes, you see a cloth-wrapped bundle of leeches, 2 copper cups filled with chalky paste, a strip of dried eel skin, a tiny bronze mirror, and what appears to be a preserved mouse skull tied to a leather thong. Modern, you would be backing out the door by now, but medieval you're here because your neighbors begged you to stop feeding coins to the fireplace and chanting at the sheep. The barber leans in. He's noticed something worrying, a darkness behind your eyes, which is strange, because you're not entirely sure he even looked directly into them. But that's beside the point. He announces this darkness with such conviction that you believe him. You nod. Everyone nods. His assistants nod. The cat, somewhere under the table, possibly nods, so he gets to work. The spikenard, quite a trepanation tool. Not quite a toothpick is, heated over a candle flame until its tip glows faintly orange. He warns you to hold still, then pokes it, gently not into your head. Thank heavens, but into the small bundle of dried herbs resting in the copper paste. He mashes it all together and smears it along your temples, tracing small spirals with a practiced finger. This will draw the madness outward, he explains. You ask if that's how it works. He ignores the question and begins, tapping your skull with the spoon, gently, rhythmic, like someone trying to wake up a coconut. You sit motionless as the tapping continues, spoon, finger, whisper, tap. The pattern is soothing in a weirdly hypnotic way. Then he pulls back, satisfied, and declares, you ready for the purge? Oh good, a purge. You're handed a thick, greenish paste made from boiled beetle shells, vinegar, and a hint of honey. It's meant to flush the bile, both real and metaphorical, from your system. You're told to swallow it all, and you do, because your other option involves something called soul bleeding, and that just doesn't sound ideal. As the concoction makes its way through you with surprising speed, the barber opens another pouch, this one embroidered with blue thread and clasped with a bone button. Inside are small flat stones, each carved with a symbol: a sun, a goat, a spiral, a flower, a full moon. He lets you pick one. You choose the flower. He doesn't approve, but he goes with it. That stone is now part of your treatment. Dipped in oil of clove and tied to your wrist with red thread, to ward off returning spirits, he says. Meanwhile, you begin to sweat. A lot. The purge is kicking in. Your vision swims. The room spins. You hear what might be church bells, or maybe just your own heartbeat. The barber takes this as a sign of success. He claps once loudly and instructs his assistants to prepare the leeches. They arrive in a small ceramic pot, squirming lazily in water tinged with blood. You're not exactly sure where they were last used. You don't ask. He applies 3 of them behind your ears. One bites quickly, the others take their time. You feel the tugging, the odd coldness, the slow ooze of blood being drained. Why the ears? Well, apparently madness lives near the temples, and by placing leeches there, the bad thoughts can be drawn out through the thin skin. Or so the theory goes. Historians still argue whether leeches were actually helpful in treating mental illness, or whether they just made patients too tired and dizzy to act out. Either way, you now have 3 of them flapping gently against your neck like damp earrings. They work. The barber begins to chant. It's not quite Latin, not quite prayer, more like lullaby meets incantation. Something about St. Bartholomew and the quieting of minds. He sprinkles salt into the fire and waves a sprig of lavender over your head. Then, with zero warning, he snips off a lock of your already shorn hair and tosses it into the flames. The fire crackles. Everyone in the room bows their head. This, apparently, is the moment the madness is supposed to leave you. Do you feel different? Well, you feel queasy. You feel lightheaded. You feel like there's a bucket of vinegar bubbling in your guts and a slug chewing on your ear. You also can't quite remember your cousin's name, but you do feel something. Not clarity, but maybe quiet. The barber interprets your silence as progress. He nods, pleased. You're handed a warm cloth to press against your stomach. It's been soaked in thyme tea and wrapped around a stone that was left in a sunbeam all morning. Sunstones draw melancholy downward, he explains, and again. You choose not to question it. One of the assistants starts sweeping the leeches back into their pot. You're told not to stand yet. Your humors must settle. He reaches for a final jar, this one filled with crushed chamomile, marjoram, and dried fig leaves. He mixes a pinch into a small cake of barley dough and hands it to you. You chew slowly. It's oddly pleasant, comforting, like biting into something that once knew what flavor was. Outside, you hear bells again, definitely real this time. Probably the monastery's afternoon prayers. Inside, the barber extinguishes the candles, one by one. Each flame snuffed with a quiet hiss, like punctuation marks at the end of some ancient, nonsensical sentence. He doesn't smile, exactly, but his eyes soften. You survived this session. That's more than he expected. Next time, he says, they'll start with head balancing. You're not sure what that means. And frankly, you're too dizzy to care. You wake up on a cot that smells like rosemary and goat hair. Or maybe you didn't sleep. Maybe you just closed your eyes and the world politely excused itself for a while. Either way, the barber is already beside you again, this time holding a delicate iron tool shaped like a miniature corkscrew. He doesn't look concerned. If anything, he looks cheerful, like a baker who's just remembered how much cinnamon to use. You sit up slowly. The dizziness from yesterday still lingers in your temples like a drunken bee. Your mouth tastes faintly of licorice root and bad decisions. But the leeches are gone. The spoon tapping has stopped. You're hopeful. Maybe today is just about rest and barley cakes. Nope. Today is about trepanation. Well, not quite trepanation. Not the full Skull experience just yet. Today is more of a test run. A little head venting, as the barber puts it. You hear the term and immediately want to leave. But you don't, because, again, this is medieval Europe, and your options for mental health support are 1. The barber, 2. Exile, or 3. Being chained in the chapel basement next to the snoring pig. So here you are, letting a man with a wheezing cough and 2 missing fingernails explain that sometimes the brain needs an opening to breathe. He shows you a small circle of polished bone. From a holy man, he says. He was very wise, right up until the donkey accident. You don't ask. Instead, he begins to oil your scalp. The smell is overpowering. Wormwood, camphor, crushed mustard seed. He hums as he works, which you're beginning to suspect is a kind of magical anesthetic. It doesn't numb pain, but it does distract you enough to forget how weird everything is. Now comes the head binding, a soft band of wool wrapped tight around your forehead, with a knotted stone dangling just above your nose. This helps the blood rise upward, he murmurs, although it mainly just gives you a headache. The assistants bring over a brass bowl filled with warm water and a rag that's been boiled in rose water and sheep urine. That last bit is meant to ward off infection, or at least confuse it. He presses it to your scalp, then marks 2 small dots just above your left ear with soot and lard. The access points. You ask if this will hurt. He says, a little, and you realize that medieval a little usually means scream into bucket-level pain. But lucky for you, this isn't the full bone drilling procedure. It's more of a symbolic trepanation. He uses a sharp, triangular tool to scratch a pattern into your scalp, a series of crisscrossing lines shaped like a hawthorn branch. Madness fears the hawthorn, he explains. Historians still argue whether medieval barbers believed in the spiritual power of these symbols, or simply used them to give patients something physical to focus on, something to hurt. just enough to distract from what was happening inside the mind. Either way, you now have a burning scalp and a growing suspicion that today's not going to end with a nap. He wraps your head in a warm cloth soaked in nettle tea and binds it with twine, like a very determined sandwich. Then you're led to a bench in the sun. It's surprisingly peaceful out here. Chickens scratch nearby. A girl is beating laundry with a stick in the river. Birds chirp with alarming optimism. For a moment, you almost forget the head scratches, the leeches, the mysterious powder. He had you swallow after breakfast to encourage dreaming, but peace doesn't last long. The barber is back, this time with a bowl of red clay, crushed lavender buds, and what he calls saint spit. You suspect it's just someone's morning phlegm mixed with holy water. He smears it across your chest in the shape of a spiral from sternum to shoulder. Now, he says, we release the trapped winds. You don't ask. He lifts your left arm and places a stone beneath it. Not just any stoner, smooth, egg-shaped pebble from the bottom of the abbey well. The weight of sorrow collects here, he says. You sit still while he recites a short chant about the air of heaviness and begins rubbing your elbow with a stiff brush made of hog bristles. It itches. A lot, then dash. Just when you think things are winding down, he throws a handful of cold water at your face and claps. You blink, gasping. He leans in. There, you are not better yet, but you are ready. Ready for what? He doesn't answer. Instead, he gestures for you to return inside there. The air is thick with steam and something sweet and sour. The assistants are burning rosemary and juniper in a brazier. The smoke coils around your freshly scratched scalp, like a curious ghost. You're seated on a stool that has a carved rabbit on one leg. Oddly comforting. The barber brings out a cloth, bundle tied with a silver clasp. Inside herbs, dozens of them. He lets you smell each one. Some are calming like chamomile. Others are nose hair scorching like sulfur and foxglove. He asks you which ones call to your madness. You point. Unsure, he selects 5. Anise, clove, mugwort, elderflower, and valerian. Together, they make up your mental vapor. These are placed into a hollowed horn. Then the horn's base is set over the brazier. Steam rises through a small mouthpiece. You are told to inhale. You do. It tastes like old socks and church incense, but it does something. Your heart slows. Your thoughts drift. For a moment, you feel neither ill nor contrast. Separate. Like your mind has stepped outside to stretch its legs. The barber watches with practiced calm. He doesn't take notes. He doesn't ask questions. He simply places a warm cloth across your shoulders and says, you may begin to forget now. You want to ask what you're supposed to forget, but your tongue feels thick, and your thoughts slip sideways before the words can leave your lips. Out in the courtyard, the bell rings again. You've made it through another round. Your madness hasn't left you, but it's quieter. For now, you're back in the barber's chair the next morning. And this time, the first thing he does is shave your eyebrows. He doesn't ask, he doesn't explain. He just tilts your chin upward, mutters something about clear passage for the mind's exhalation, and begins scraping. It feels strange, your whole face bare, every draught of air brushing your skin like cold fingers. He spritzes your scalp and forehead with something sharp and herbal, and suddenly your eyes are watering uncontrollably. This is good, he says cheerfully. The madness leaks through the eyes. You blink a lot, not because you're sure he's right, but because your vision is currently doing a little dance of its own, Once the brow shaving is complete, he rubs your face with a paste of rosemary, salt, and mashed wild onion. This stings deeply. He hums a lullaby again. You're starting to think that's less for you, more for him. There's a belief, you see, that mental illness can be absorbed through hair and skin like smoke into cloth, and the barber is convinced that removing the hair will give your soul more space to breathe. It doesn't help that you've been muttering to your bowl of stew at dinner and asking trees for permission to pass. Your neighbors are watching closely. One more incident and it's off to the cloister cellars, or worse, the duck pond. The barber isn't cruel, just convinced, and he's doing what he knows, which, for better or worse, involves rosemary water and onions in places no onions should be. He steps back to admire his work. Your now completely bald head, brows, and even a few stubborn neck hairs plucked for good measure. You look like a cross between a saint and a very confused egg. Then he brings out the hat. Yes, the hat. A little linen cap, padded with lamb's wool and embroidered with a symbol that looks vaguely like a chicken standing on a scroll. You're told this will shield the upper thoughts. You don't know what that means, but at this point, you're not fighting it. He ties it under your chin and gives you a thimble of wine steeped in valerian root. You sip. It's awful. But within minutes, your limbs start to float. He leads you to the steam corner, again lavender smoke now, with burning petals from the barber's personal herb stash. Only the calming ones, he assures you, tossing something brown and flaky into the flame. It crackles like parchment. The assistants return with more tools, but not for surgery this time. For symmetry, they bring a tiny curved blade one that's used for trimming ears and other delicate places, with a steady hand. The barber shapes the thin fuzz of hair, trying to grow back along your jawline. Balance brings peace, he says. Peace brings clarity. This is less about aesthetics, more about order. There's a theory, particularly among monastic barbers, that neatness of the face can influence neatness of the mind. A tidy jaw, a symmetrical scalp, a trimmed and soothed forehead. These things might help coax the soul back into place. He applies a cold compress next. A folded scrap of wool dipped in a concoction made from elderflower water and sour goat's milk. This is pressed against your forehead and held there while the assistants chant softly from a worn scroll. You don't understand the words, but they rhyme. That's something. Then, just as your stomach starts growling, you're handed a small bowl of something warm, a thin porridge laced with fennel, nutmeg, and honey. You eat slowly. It's the best part of the day. Almost delicious. While you eat, the barber tells a story. He says there was once a man who laughed constantly. Not a happy laugher, broken, wheezing, hiccuping kind of laugh. People thought he was possessed. One barber shaved his head, another bled him dry. But it wasn't until the third treated him with goat's milk, silence, and sleep that he quieted. You nod. The assistants nod. The cat, again, might be nodding somewhere in the rafters. And then, of course, the humor chart comes back out. The barber compares your complexion, pulse, and current mood to the alignment of the 4 bodily humors. Your skin is dry, your voice is low, your pupils are wide. A classic melancholic, too much black bile. The treatment, more warmth, more movement, less stillness, and oddly enough, a mild laxative. He has just the thing. He hands you a piece of preserved fig rolled in beeswax and powdered with something yellow. You chew it reluctantly. It tastes energetic. Now comes the eyebrow massage. Yes, eyebrow massage. Even though yours are gone, the skin beneath them still exists, and apparently, it's very important. With oiled thumbs, he rubs tiny circles. Where your brows used to be, pausing every few seconds to whisper a word. Peace, ease, return, stillness. It's not unpleasant. And for a brief moment, you feel as if something inside your head might actually shift into place. Historians still argue whether these routines were more ritual than remedy, whether they provided real neurological comfort, or simply convinced the sufferer that healing was happening. But ritual is powerful, especially when it includes warm hands, soft smoke, and food that doesn't actively offend you. You're given a final sip of barley tea and told to lie down with a small bundle of herbs beneath your neck. The bundle contains lavender, thyme, and something the barber calls sleep grass. It's probably just hay, but it smells like safety. You close your eyes. He doesn't say goodbye, just brushes your temple once with a feather yes. A literal feather ant steps away. You breathe in. There's no screaming, no scratching, no buzzing in your ears. Not even a leech in sight, just quiet. For now, you wake to the sound of chickens. Not exactly the clarion call of healing, but in this village, it might as well be the official start to medical recovery. The feather-stuffed headrest beneath your neck smells faintly of thyme and sheep. The herbal pouch must have leaked. Your shaved head is tender, but cool. You touch the linen cap that slid halfway down your face. The barber must have adjusted it in the night. You blink groggily as someone ladles warm barley water into a clay mug and presses it into your hands. Today's diagnosis will be different, because today it's about your humors, not your sense of humor, which has frankly gone missing, but the classic quartet of bodily fluids that supposedly rule your mind: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. If you've ever wept suddenly or thrown a chicken leg across a table because someone looked at you funny, congratulations, you've probably suffered from an imbalance. The barber claps his hands once and announces your reading for the days using a chart made of pigskin stretched taut across a wooden frame, divided like a seasonal pie. Blood for spring, yellow bile for summer, black bile for autumn, and phlegm for winter. Somehow, this translates to your mental state. He squints at you and declares, autumnal imbalance. 2. Much black bile. Again, you start to suspect black bile is blamed for most things around here: sadness, confusion, hiccups, possibly even bad turnip harvests to balance it. The barber prescribes 3 things: a thick herbal paste to be rubbed into the soles of your feet, a bloodletting session timed precisely to the position of the sun, an afternoon sweat purge in the hut behind the stable. Lovely. First comes the paste. It's greenish-brown, speckled with something gritty, and smells of mustard, garlic, and old walnuts. The assistant kneels with practiced resignation and begins massaging it into your bare feet. The idea, apparently, is to draw the poison downward, because according to the barber's philosophy, sadness sinks in less. Of course, you're a woman, in which case it rises. We'll get to that. You try not to wince as your skin tingles with every rub. If it burns, he says, the madness is fighting back, which is not exactly reassuring. The second treatment of the day is a return to an old favorite, bloodletting this time. However, the barber is more precise. He leads you outside, places your hand on a flat stone warmed by the sun, and observes your shadow. Its angle apparently confirms the presence of overripe bile. You'd argue, but he's already tying a thin strip of cloth above your ankle. Not your arm today. Your leg, different vessels for different vapors, he explains. He slices a neat, shallow cut just above the ankle bone and lets the blood drip into a fresh bowl. It smells sharp. Your head swims again, and yet, oddly, a part of you starts to feel light, not better, but emptier. Historians still debate whether bloodletting ever had any actual physiological effect, or whether it simply weakened the patient until their mind had no energy left to rebel. In your case, the jury's still out. Once the flow stops, he smears your skin with crushed mint and spider webs to encourage clotting. You don't ask where the webs came from. Next stop, the sweat hut. It's not much. A wooden lean-to behind the stable, insulated with peat, hay, and a fair number of wasps. Inside, a low bench and a deep basin of steaming water mixed with sage, mugwort, and apple peelings. You're instructed to strip to your linen undershirt and sit quietly. You do. The steam clings to your skin immediately. You feel your pores protesting. You drip. You slide. You stew. The barber peers in occasionally, tossing more herbs onto the coals. Release the dampness, he calls. You didn't know you had dampness. You definitely do now. An hour later, dripping and dizzy, you're handed a rough towel and told you've shed the inner frost, which is just another way of saying you're really sweaty and hopefully slightly more sane. You dress slowly. Even your bones feel steamed back in the shop. The barber offers you a cooling drafted drink made from barley, cucumber pulp, and a dash of vinegar. It's revolting. You drink every drop. Then comes the final act of the day, the humoral test of mood. He hands you 4 wooden tokens, each painted a color representing a humor. Red for blood, yellow for bile, black for black, bile white for phlegm. He sets them on a cloth and asks you, gently, to pick one. Not based on reason, just feeling. You stare. Then slowly your hand drifts toward the black one. Again he sighs. Still too much, he mutters. He wraps the tokens in cloth and stores them away. Tomorrow, he says, you'll need a dream purge, whatever. That is, you're ushered to your cot once more, this time with a fresh lavender bundle and a tiny carved amulet placed beside your pillow. To keep the humors from rearranging overnight, he says cryptically. You lie there, head still bare, feet still tingling, body still leaking lavender. Your thoughts are slower now. Not calm exactly, but fogged, like someone took a damp cloth to your brain and wiped across the window. You're not sure what you see, but it's quieter than it was. And for now, that's enough. You're dreaming of chickens again, except this time they're reciting prayers and gently pecking your forehead with rosemary twigs. You blink awake. The dream fades slowly, like ink in water. Outside the shutters, it's still dark. Not quite dawn, but not quite night. That soft in-between hour when even the ghosts take a tea break. The barber is already awake. Of course he is. You hear him boiling something over a small brazier and muttering softly to himself. You catch the words, wool spirits and bad winds. That can't be good. Today's treatment begins before you even sit up. He hands you a clay cup filled with hot liquid that smells like burning cabbage. This, he says proudly, will cleanse the shadows behind your eyes. You sip cautiously. It tastes like old socks and grief, and maybe a hint of lavender. Your stomach immediately starts protesting, but you keep it down, barely. Today's therapy is simple in name, but not in execution. Scolding and freezing, yes, on purpose, according to the barber and several loose-leaf manuscripts in the village abbey. Madness is a problem of extremes. Either too much heat in the head or too much cold in the bones. So, to reset the body, you must be dunked between the two, like a very confused biscuit. First comes the hot cloth treatment. You're guided to a chair by the hearth, where assistants press steaming wool bundles drenched in elderflower and vinegar against your chest, shoulders, and forehead. It stings. At first, then burns, then, oddly, itches. You breathe through it. Each cloth is applied, removed, replaced in rhythm. One assistant counts aloud. The other fans your face with a goose feather. Then, without warning, they stop. The barber gestures to a small wooden barrel filled with water, so cold it's misting at the rim. You already know what's coming, before you can protest. They press a folded linen square across your face and tip you backward into the water. It's brief, just a splash, but the cold punches every thought right out of your skull. You gasp, sputter, and immediately feel like you've forgotten your name, your age, and how socks work. This is good, the barber says, noting the drool now forming at the corner of your mouth. The mind is shifting. You're pulled from the barrel and wrapped in a scratchy wool sheet, then led back to the fire. The cycle continues. Heat, cold, heat, cold. Your skin prickles, your teeth chatter, but deep inside, something begins to give way. A sliver of stillness peeks through. Eventually, the fire stays on. The cloths dry. The barrel is pushed away. The barber checks your pulse. Still unsettled, he says. But better. Now comes the chanting phase. You're seated on a low stool, arms folded, while two assistants kneel and hum a melody that sounds suspiciously like a funeral dirge for a goat. The barber walks in slow circles around you, sprinkling powdered fennel into the air. You try not to sneeze. It tickles something all the way down to your stomach. Let the bile flow out with the breath, he says so. Naturally, he hands you a feather. You're told to breathe on it softly, steadily until your chest no longer rises and falls with panic. You don't understand how this helps, but somehow it does. The feather flutters. You focus. Then comes the spinning chair. Oh yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. In the corner of the shop is a wooden stool mounted on a Lazy-Stazan-style base, originally built for elderly weavers. Today, it's for you. You sit. The barber gives the stool a firm spin. The idea that madness can be confused out of the body. Spinning, the patient disrupts their inner equilibrium, jars loose the foul winds, and resets the senses. At first, you chuckle. Then the room begins to sway. Then your stomach writes a formal letter of protest. You clutch your knees and try to focus on anything stable. The cat on the beam, the flicker of the candle, the fact that you've now officially been spun by a licensed barber-surgeon in a bald cap soaked with elderflower. Eventually, the spinning slows. You are handed a cold cloth and a piece of crystallized honey to suck on. Somehow, you're still upright. The barber smiles. Not everyone holds their lunch, he says. Apparently, you're doing well. And now, the final element of the day, the mirror test. He brings out a silver mirror, tarnished, warped, at the corners, clearly ancient. You're told to look into it, but not at yourself. Look past the face, he says. See if the eyes belong to you. You stare. At first, it's just you, eyebrowless, pale, very damp. Then, you're not so sure. Your reflection seems unfamiliar, hollow even. The assistants take notes. One marks something on a wax tablet. You hear the word partial displacement. That doesn't sound like a compliment. Historians still argue whether the mirror test was real diagnosis or performance, but in some places, they believed madness could be seen in the reflection. If your eyes shifted, if your mouth didn't move in sync, if your double blinked out of rhythm, you pass. Barely. The barber nods and dabs a drop of rose oil on your forehead as a sign of momentary clarity. It feels cool, centered, real. You're sent to rest. Tonight, the pillow smells like mint. The breeze through the shutter slats is soft. You pull the wool blanket higher, and for the first time in days, your brain doesn't feel like it's on fire or underwater. It's just quiet, which is a miracle, really. Considering they try to boil you like a dumpling and spin the madness out through your earlobes, you're starting to get used to the rituals, the bitter teas, the whispered chants, the warm cloths on your head. It's not that you believe they're working, but your mind is quieter, or maybe it's just exhausted. Either way, when the barber greets you this morning with a fresh vial of something syrupy and a smile that looks vaguely like pity, you no longer flinch. Today's treatment, he announces, is dream reversal. That sounds either hopeful or terrifying. You're not sure which. You've been talking in your sleep, again loudly, in full Latin, despite never having studied a day of it. At one point, you reportedly sat up, declared yourself the reincarnation of a turnip, and asked the moon for legal counsel. The assistants took notes. The barber merely nodded and fetched the dream herbs. So now, with your shaved head gleaming, and your neck smelling faintly of vinegar and goat, you sit before a bowl of steaming water. Inside float pale petals, yellowish roots, and what might be a sliver of chalk, or bone, or both. The barber lifts a lid from a small iron cup and reveals today's main ingredient. Sleep, Ashdot. You watch as he pinches a bit of the dark grey powder and sprinkles it into the bowl. The mixture fizzes faintly. According to the barber, this ash is made by burning the bed straw of those recently cured of madness. Or at least those who seemed cured before they wandered into the woods and never returned. Either way, it's considered potent stuff. You are to inhale the steam and send your dreams back where they came from. So you do. At first, the smell is earthy, then strange, like wet parchment and licorice root left in the rain. You close your eyes. He begins speaking slowly, steadily asking you to picture your dreams, not the pleasant ones, the others, the ones with twisting staircases, barking trees, your mother's voice coming from a loaf of bread. You try. You do, then he says, "Now imagine the dream walking backward." The tree unbarks. The bread unspeaks. The moon pulls its light back behind the hills. It's nonsense, and yet you feel something loosen. The assistants begin to chant. One rhythm, no words, just breath and vibration. You're told this helps trap the dreams in the steam. Now the barber brings forward a wax tablet and asks you to draw your mind. You blink at him, yes, with a stylus. Right there, draw your mind. You scratch a spiral, a bird, a confused-looking goat. You don't know what you're doing. He studies it seriously, then taps a spot near the goat. That, he says solemnly, is where the pressure lies. You nod as if this means something. He nods back as if it means everything. Historians still argue whether these dream rituals were based on sincere belief, improvisation, or just very bored monks trying to keep patients occupied. Probably all three. But the mind drawing isn't even the strangest part of today. That honor goes to the egg test. It begins with a raw goose egg, still warm. The barber cracks it gently into a bowl, then passes it slowly over your face, not touching, just hovering. Then he dumps the yolk into a second bowl and peers inside like it's a crystal ball. Cloudy, he says, you're still trapped in the memory air. He mixes the egg with soot and fennel and begins drawing lines on your chest, a spiral over your heart, a dot over your sternum, a line across your shoulder blades. You look like a saint in reverse. The lines are meant to trick the mind, to reroute the dream paths, or maybe to embarrass you into sanity. Hard to say. Next, he wraps your feet in warmed cabbage leaves soaked in lemon balm tea, because obviously, dreams leave through the soles, he says, unless blocked. You ask what happens if they are blocked. He doesn't answer. You sit, cabbage-footed and egg-painted, for an hour, and slowly the fog settles. Not your thoughts, those are still a bit scrambled, but the sensation of being chased by your own brain begins to fade. The barber closes the shutters. The assistants bring a final item for today, a sleep mask, stitched from linen and filled with dried chamomile, juniper, and something he only calls blessing dust. You lie back. He places it gently across your eyes. He says nothing, but you hear him whisper as he walks away, let the dreams forget you tonight. You're not sure if that's comforting or ominous. The scent of juniper and warm cloth fills your nostrils. Your breathing slows. Your fingers loosen. For the first time in days, sleep comes quickly, and just maybe, if you're lucky, nothing follows you in. You're sitting in a circle of salt. No, really, a literal circle. The barber made it himself this morning, carefully pouring from a small leather pouch, walking slowly around your stool while muttering a prayer to Saint Dymphna, patron saint of mental distress. Apparently, salt keeps the mind from slipping out of the body and joining the birds, or the clouds, or the pig who sometimes whispers secrets at night. Today's method is called containment therapy. It's less about treating the madness directly and more about stopping it from escaping, or spreading, or becoming contagious. You sit cross-legged in your salt circle while the assistants arrange 7 polished stones around the perimeter. Each one corresponds to a body part: head, heart, liver, lungs, kidneys, spleen, and Dodley left elbow. The barber explains that in the right configuration, these stones can form a kind of mental fence, something the soul can't wander beyond. You ask if it works. He raises an eyebrow. Well, he says, you're still here. Point taken. He places a warm compress of lemon balm and goose fat on your chest, then instructs you to breathe slowly, in through the nose, out through the ears. Yes, the ears. You're told to imagine your thoughts escaping through the little bones in your inner ear like smoke seeping through a keyhole. This feels ridiculous, but you try anyway. Now comes the shadow test. You're placed on a low stool in front of the window. The early morning sun stretches your shadow across the floor like a dark puddle. The barber kneels beside it. He stares at your shadow's head, then its shoulders, then the left arm. He seems concerned. There, he says, you've lost alignment. The madness is leaning left. You glance at your shadow. It's definitely leaning left. But so are you, slightly, because the stool is broken. You don't point this out. Instead, he draws a chalk line where your shadow should be. Then he adjusts your posture until the two align. Your back aches, your knees crack, but your shadow looks remarkably upright. You're given a mug of balancing broth, which is mostly turnip water and cloves, and asked to drink it while humming. This, apparently, reinforces the alignment. Then the assistants re-enter with the box. The box is made of oak, small, polished, smells faintly of beeswax and something metallic. You are told to whisper your worst thought into the box, just one. You hesitate. The assistants look away politely, so you lean forward and whisper something that's been gnawing at the back of your brain for days. The barber nods, closes the lid, and seals it with wax. It stays in there, he says softly, for 7 days. You want to ask what happens after 7 days, but he's already placing the box high on a shelf, beside a taxidermied owl and 3 empty bottles labeled mental sap. Now comes movement therapy. Don't get excited. It's not dancing, not really. More like pacing in deliberate patterns. The assistants draw a figure-8 path in ash on the floor. You are to walk it, slowly, repeatedly, arms held slightly out, palms up. Every third step, you must pause and recite a calming word. You choose stillness, stillness, stillness. It starts out awkward, then silly, then oddly peaceful. After 15 minutes, your thoughts aren't louder or quieter, just more distant, like they're watching from the rafters, politely waiting their turn. The barber marks a small on his wax tablet. Now comes smoke bathing. You stand in a small alcove filled with rosemary smoke. The scent curls around you like a hug. The assistants chant softly, tapping 2 wooden spoons in rhythm. It sounds like a heartbeat. Then they bring out the bell. Yes, the bell dot. Yes, the bell. It's small, silver, and slightly cracked. They ring it near your ears in slow pulses. This, you're told, shakes loose the bad echoes. Historians still argue whether bells were used to purify, soothe, or simply startle patients into a reset. Either way, it works. Your shoulders drop, your breath deepens. For once, you are perfectly, absolutely present. The session ends with silence therapy. You're placed in a curtained corner with a warm stone under your feet and a damp cloth over your eyes. No sounds, no voices. No scratching chickens or chanting or laughter or spoons. Just the hum of your own body. A slow, rhythmic pulse you'd forgotten was yours. You stay there for what feels like hours. When the cloth is removed, the room is dim. A candle flickers nearby. The barber is gone, but someone's left a fresh blanket on your stool. You sit in it for a while, wrapped, quiet. Still the madness isn't gone, but it's fuller, contained, and outside your little circle of salt. The world waits patiently. You've been here long enough that the chickens have stopped flinching when you talk to them. The assistants no longer double-check your blanket folds. The cat now sleeps directly on your chest when you lie down. And the barber has started calling you the quiet one, which is frankly ironic given last night's episode involving a bucket, a hymn, and a rather dramatic proclamation about being the true pope of rain. Still, he says you're improving, so today he decides it's time for symbolic extraction. It sounds serious and a bit magical, like something involving relics and maybe an exorcist with good posture. In reality, it involves bread. Stale bread, to be specific. You're seated on a wooden bench facing east. always east. That's where the clean air of heaven is believed to come from. Behind you, the assistant holds a small loaf dense, crusted, slightly moldy, and begins whispering to it. Yes, to the bread. He explains that madness, especially the lingering kind, can be persuaded to exit the body if it believes it has somewhere else to go. So the bread serves as a decoy, a target, a cozy new home for whatever spirit has been rattling around in your skull like a loose spoon in a cauldron. You're told to breathe deeply, slowly, then exhale into the bread. He holds it close to your lips. As you do this, 3 long breaths, 1 for the fear, 1 for the noise, 1 for the thing you can't name. Then the bread is wrapped in a linen scrap marked with an inked rune and taken outside to be buried beneath a rowan tree. Apparently, rowans are excellent at digesting madness. Who knew? Next up is memory rinsing. This involves a special wash made from crushed rose hips, burnt sugar, and rainwater collected during a thunderstorm. The mixture is cool, slightly sticky, and smells like someone tried to turn sadness into perfume. You lie back as it's poured slowly across your scalp. Your eyes are covered with cabbage leaves soaked in thyme ointment to keep the recent pain from re-entering through your tear ducts. The liquid runs down your neck, over your shoulders, and pools around your collarbones. The barber whispers as he pours, "Forget the door, forget the voice, forget the crooked path." Each phrase is rhythmic, mesmerizing, like the beginning of a spell you almost believe in. Historians still argue whether memory rinsing was based on spiritual doctrine or sheer hope, but records show it was practiced even in well-respected monastic infirmaries, especially on night screamers. You haven't screamed at night since yesterday. Progress after the rinse comes object displacement. This one's easy. In theory, you are handed 3 small items: a dried acorn, a piece of wool, and a tiny iron nail. You are told to hold them. In your palm, focus on the feeling of your worst thought, and then throw the objects into the hearth. It's supposed to be a transference, a symbolic burning. You do it, one by one. The wool shrivels, the acorn pops, the nail glows briefly and disappears beneath the ash. You feel lighter, or maybe just warm. Then comes the herbal threading. A single strand of red silk is passed through the smoke of 7 different herbs: lavender, hyssop, sage, rue, valerian, wormwood, and mint. Then, carefully, it is tied around your wrist. Not tight, just snug. A reminder, the barber says, that not every thought belongs to you. You look at it for a long time. A bit of red in a sea of grey linen. A mark that says, you are still here. Finally, you are given a parchment. On it is a drawing, a rough, shaky outline of something, a figure, a shape. It could be a rabbit or a very anxious cloud. You're told this is your mental guardian by a previous patient. You are to keep it with you. Speak to it, blame it, even give it the parts of yourself you're tired of carrying. You roll it gently and slip it into your sleeve. The day ends with a simple ritual: 7 sips of silence, a cup of warm water. Your 2 sip once, breathe once, no speaking, no thinking. If possible, just sip and breathe. 1, 2, 3. By the 7th sip, something in your chest releases. Maybe not healing, not quite, but acceptance. That strange, slippery cousin of peace. You lie down again on your cot. The cat is already there, purring like a distant drum. The assistant dims the lantern. Your wrist still bears the red thread, and just before you drift off, You whisper to your sleeve, "Watch me tonight." And for once, sleep arrives without a fight. You wake to the sound of scratching, not mice, not chickens. It's the barber, slowly dragging charcoal across parchment, sketching something by candlelight. His back is to you, but he hums a familiar tune, the same lullaby he's hummed since day one, the same one he used to calm your limbs while rubbing goose fat on your temples. You sit up. Your body feels less like a battlefield today, more like a library that's been badly organized, but is at least quiet. The barber turns, sees you, and smiles. "Today," he says, "we test the angels." You are not ready for that sentence, but before you can protest, he's already preparing the room for angelic alignment. This involves 12 small mirrors arranged in a spiral across the floor, each angled carefully with a piece of beeswax and a sliver of soapstone. According to his well-thumbed handbook, which may or may not be translated correctly, these mirrors help reflect not your image, but your soul's posture. Whatever that means, you're seated at the center of the spiral. Your legs are crossed. Your hands rest palm up on your knees. The assistants dim the lamps. The morning light filters in just so catching each mirror, bouncing across the walls in a pattern that looks vaguely like a bird in flight. The barber places a single feather on your forehead to weigh your lightness, he says. You try not to sneeze. He stands in the doorway and calls softly to the empty air. If there are guardian spirits nearby, show us your work. You feel ridiculous, but the air does feel stiller than usual. A quiet settles in your chest that has nothing to do with sleep, nothing to do with medicine. Just a hush, like someone's holding their breath with you. Eventually, he removes the feather and inspects it. A little lighter than yesterday, he says. Not quite floating, but close. You're not sure if he's joking. You hope he is. Next comes laughter purging. You haven't laughed in weeks. Not a real laugh. Maybe a few confused snorts. Or that one time you giggled at a pigeon with a lopsided foot. But the barber insists that certain forms of madness live in your diaphragm, in the muscles that used to laugh, and if those muscles are never used, if they rust, then sorrow has. Free rein. So he tells jokes, bad ones, about monks and misbehaving goats, about saints who accidentally healed pigs instead of people, about the bishop who got drunk on baptismal wine and tried to bless a cabbage. You don't laugh, not at first, but then he begins doing voices, squeaky ones, grumpy ones, a flawless impression of the assistant who snores like a cow giving birth, and without warning, it happens, one soft, surprised chuckle. Then a laugh, a real laugh, laughter with weight. It bubbles up like a forgotten memory and spills into the room. The assistants blink. The barber grins. There, he says, that's the stuff. He gives you a moment to breathe, then moves. On today's third treatment, madness mapping, it begins with a sheet of parchment divided into quadrants. In each section, you're asked to draw what your mind feels like during different hours. Dawn, midday, dusk. Night you stare at the blank sheet. Then you begin. Dawn, a tangle of vines. Midday, a circle of knives. Dusk, a falling star that never lands. Night, just fog. The barber reviews your map and nods. You've shifted, he says. There's less fire, more water. That's good. He rolls the parchment and seals it with twine. We'll burn this later. But not yet. It's still watching. You don't ask what it is. Instead, you'll lead outside for wind cleansing. This is simple. You stand on the hill behind the barber's hut, facing north. The assistants shake out a wool cloak and drape it across your shoulders. The breeze smells of pine and old rain. You breathe it in, slowly. 7 counts in. 7 counts out. The wind presses against you gently, like a hand nudging your thoughts into order. You are instructed to speak a single sentence into the air. Something true, so you say, "I'm still afraid." The wind takes it, carries it away. You don't feel lighter, but you do feel heard. Back inside, you are offered a small bowl of clarity broth. It contains parsley, crushed lentils, and what might be part of a turnip. You eat it without complaining. The barber watches closely. You realize he's been waiting for this moment. The moment you eat without trembling, the moment you laugh without prompting, the moment your madness becomes something you observe, not something you are. He doesn't say it aloud, but his nod says enough. The final ritual today is a quiet one, a mirror, a feather, and a question. Do you recognize the eyes you see? You look, they're tired, slightly haunted, still missing eyebrows, but they are, unmistakably, yours. You nod. He nods back. For now, the madness is caged. For now, your mind is a room with windows again, and the wind outside no longer howls. It whispers. You no longer flinch when they bring out the leeches. That's today's opening move. Temperament. Balancing by leech. Don't worry, they're not using the big ones. Not the bloated swamp beasts they save for high fevers or swollen legs. These are the dainty kind, if such a word can be used for a creature that suctions to your temple and drinks your thoughts through your skin. The assistant sets one gently on your neck, just beneath the jawline. The other goes near your temple, for balance. The barber says. You sit still, hands folded, and wait. According to the theory, leeches draw not just blood, but heat. And heat, as always, is the enemy of a peaceful mind. Too much heat, too much bile, too many thoughts per minute. These are the ingredients for a fractured soul. You feel the slow tug as the leech latches on. You breathe. It's not painful. Just odd. Like someone rewinding your thoughts, one drop at a time. After 20 minutes, the barber removes them carefully, places them in a jar, and mutters a small thank you. Yes, to the leeches. Even they get respect here. Your neck is dabbed with rosemary vinegar, and you're offered a spoon of honey to restore sweetness to the tongue. You're not sure your tongue was ever particularly sweet, but the honey is nice. Next, it's time for sound shaping. You're led to the corner of the room where thin bronze chimes hang from the rafters. Each one is tuned to a different frequency. According to the assistant, who may or may not be guessing, you sit beneath them as the wind, or perhaps a hidden assistant with a fan, causes them to ring softly in slow, unsteady waves. It's strangely calming. The idea is that sound has shape, and madness is a shapeless thing. So, with enough repetition and resonance, the sounds might help carve your thoughts into manageable forms. Like pressing soft dough into molds, the chimes tinkle. You listen. You count each note in your head and match it to your breath. In, out, ding, pause. Then the barber whispers the question. Where are you right now? You don't say the name. Of the village? You don't say, this bench. You pause. Then you say, near enough. He smiles. The next treatment is one of the strangest yet, empathy, inversion. You are given a sheet of parchment with a single name written on it. A villager. Someone who once sat in this chair. Someone who, according to the barber, was healed or disappeared, Long ago, your task is to imagine their madness, to try it on like a cloak. You are told this will help you understand where your madness ends and someone else's begins. You stare at the name Henricus. You've never met him. Maybe he was real. Maybe he's a story. You imagine his thoughts, the whispering spoons, the window that watched him back, the weight of things left unsaid. You begin to feel something strange. Not madness, but pity. The barber notes your pulse. Empathy draws the poison out, he says. Just don't drink it back in. Next up is ritual containment, but not the salt circle this time. Today, it's clay jars, 3 of them, each painted with a crude symbol, a spiral, a flame, and a teardrop. You were told to whisper a memory into each one, a real one. The first time you felt the world go quiet, the first time it screamed, the first time it forgot your name. You whisper. The jars are sealed, waxed shut, set on a shelf beside others. No labels, no names, just silence in a row. You ask what happens to them. They stay, the barber says. Long after we're gone, you're not sure if that's comforting or unnerving. Now comes the airing ritual. You're led to a small courtyard, ringed with herbs and low stone walls. A chair is set in the center, facing upward. You are to sit there for an hour. Eyes open, mouth closed, ears listening. The sky is soft today. Not quite blue, not quite grey. A breeze tugs at the hem of your tunic. You hear birds, a goat, a rustling. From something that might be the barber's cat plotting mischief. And then, in that stillness, something inside you settles. Not fully, not forever. But like a book finally placed back on the correct shelf, you return to the hut quietly. The barber hands you a mug of memory, tear-bitter blend of thyme, honeycomb, and bark steeped in spring water. You sip it slowly. You can feel your breath deepen with each swallow. You're asked to sit one last time before the hearth, your hands resting open, your eyes closed. He asks you again, where are you? And this time, you don't hesitate. You say, here. He nods. For now, that's enough. The morning begins with fire, not a blaze, just a small brazier glowing in the dim corner of the barber's shop, casting flickering shadows along the wall. The assistant is already awake, grinding dried yarrow and angelica root with a stone. Pestle, today, the barber says, is for binding the soul. That sounds ominous, but it's meant to be healing. To tie the soul back to the body it's trying to escape. You're guided to a bench near the fire and handed a thin strip of undyed linen. One end is dipped in rose oil, the other in vinegar and mint. As you hold it in your palms, the barber begins reciting a slow, rhythmic chant somewhere between a prayer and a lullaby. He wraps the cloth loosely around your wrists, then your ankles, then gently places a second strip across your chest, barely a weight, just a whisper of pressure. Now the soul remembers where to stay, he murmurs. You're asked to remain still for a full hour. No talking, no thinking. If possible, just breathing, with your whole self tethered gently to the earth. Afterward, you're led to a copper basin filled with warm lavender water. The barber takes your hands and washes them as if they've committed a crime. Then your feet, then your forehead. This is cleansing by proxia, ritual designed for those who can't speak the words they need to say. The water speaks instead. Each rinse is a small confession, each cloth a pardon. Once dried, you're brought before the herb curtain. It's a wall of hanging bundles, rosemary, bay leaf, hyssop, mugwort, thyme, sweet rush, swaying slightly with the breeze. You're told to walk through it slowly, eyes closed, arms out. Every brush of a leaf is a blessing of breath. Historians still debate if this practice was medical, magical, or just aromatic. But it feels real, and somehow you feel touched by each leaf. Afterward, you're handed a small wax bowler mind seal. It's warm and soft, infused with frankincense. You're instructed to hold it to your forehead and think of the worst noise in your mind, then crush it. You do. The wax yields with a soft pop, and for the first time in weeks, the noise quiets. The final act today is naming the echo. You're asked to write a name, not your own, not someone you know, just a name that feels familiar to the part of you that's been hurting. You write Ilna. You don't know where it comes from, but it feels right. The barber burns the paper. The echo is now known. He says, and cannot shout in the dark anymore. You dream of soft light, woven baskets, and a field of red herbs swaying in perfect rhythm. No voices, no screams, just breath and breeze. You wake to find the barber standing beside you, holding a tiny pouch made of stitched wool. Inside, crushed violets and dried apple peel. Today is for reintroduction, he says. You blink too. What? To yourself. You're taken outside to the small spring behind the hut. A mirror has been propped up on a stone beside the water. Not for reflection, the barber says. For re-meeting, he asks you to say your name out loud. At first, your lips don't move. The name catches, half-spoken, but eventually you manage a quiet, uncertain, I am still here. That's enough. You're handed a cloak of returner, simple. Wool shawl, stitched with red thread in 7 spirals. You wrap it around your shoulders. It itches slightly, but the warmth is grounding. The barber marks your return by placing a single drop of juniper oil behind each ear. Then you're asked to walk the spiral, path-looping, herb-lined trail behind the garden. You're told to speak your own thoughts. Aloud, any thought. Just one, you say, I want to be quiet. The wind accepts it. Next comes taste, rebirth. You are offered 3 bowls, 1 sweet, 1 sour, 1 bitter. You are to eat from each in silence and notice which taste speaks to you. You linger longest over the bitter radish and vinegar, then finally end with honey on warm bread. The assistants smile. Bitter is for those who've remembered how to carry sharp things without cutting themselves. You don't reply, but you understand. The final ritual today is nail etching. A thin line is drawn across each thumbnail with a tiny iron stylus. The lines are shallow, almost invisible, just enough to be felt. They represent 7 days of healing, 7 days of staying, 7 days without losing yourself completely. You're told to let them grow out naturally. When the marks vanish, you'll be ready. Maybe the cot feels too soft now, the room too still. It's the strange discomfort of healing when pain begins to leave. It leaves behind a space you don't know how to fill. Today is about preparation. For release, you won't leave yet, but soon. The barber can see it in your eyes. You've stopped arguing with the wind, he says. The day begins with writing the tether. You're handed a parchment. You are to write 5 things that remind you of the world outside this place. Not loves, not dreams, just anchors. You write, the smell of rosemary on my mother's sleeves, the sound of boots on wet wood, the curve of river reeds in autumn, the color of overripe plums, the feel of old paper, These are copied into a small scroll, sealed with wax, and tied to a simple wooden token. You're told to keep it with you always. Next is boundary walking. You're led around the full edge of the barber's grounds, slowly, one hand always touching the stone wall, or the fence, or the hedgerow, every 10 steps. You're asked to pause and breathe every 20. You whisper your name. By the time you've circled the property, your body knows the edges of this place and where it ends. Historians note that in many monastic hospitals, patients nearing recovery were led on similar walks to remember the shape of freedom. Later, you're given a final gift, the whisper thread, a long braid of wool, threaded with rosemary and mint stems, meant to be worn hidden beneath your clothes. You're to whisper into it whenever the world feels too loud. Your voice will stay there, the barber says, and remind you that silence is possible. You believe him. The bag is small. Just a satchel, really. Inside, your whisper thread, the wooden token with the anchor scroll, a sprig of dried sage, and a single polished stone from the salt circle where this all began. You're not leaving today, but the bag sits ready, and that changes everything. This morning's ritual is quiet. The barber lights a candle and places it beside your cot. No words today, he says, only memory. You sit beside the flame. You remember your first night here, the fever, the fear, the dizziness, the way your voice echoed in your skull like a scream in a well. You remember the leeches. You remember the cat that slept on your chest, the red thread. The egg cracked like a question. You remember naming your echo. You remember laughing, and then the sealing ritual. A small bowl of warm beeswax is stirred with rosemary ash and soot from the herb curtain. The mixture is spooned onto a strip of linen. The barber presses it gently over your chest, right where your ribs part, not to hide the madness, he says, but to keep it folded. You wear it like a badge. The final act is yours alone. The final mirror, the same silver mirror from weeks ago, same tarnish, same warping. You hold it. Look, this time you see a person who is tired, but present, eyebrows beginning to grow back, scars softening, voice ready. You whisper your name one last time, and this time it answers back. So now, as the candle flickers low, and the scent of rosemary still clings to your sleeve, you lie back on your cot maybe, for the last time in this small, strange place where madness was seen, not feared, named, not punished, folded, not destroyed. The straw mattress crackles gently beneath you. The room breathes its slow, warm breath. The shadows dance soft patterns on the ceiling above you, and the quiet hum of the wind through the shutter reminds you that the world, too, is healing. You are no longer being hunted by your thoughts, no longer spinning beneath their weight. They're still there, of course, but they're quieter now, sitting politely in the corners of your mind, waiting to be heard, not obeyed. Outside, a rooster shifts its feet. Inside, your breath steadies. You pull the blanket higher, your thumb brushing against the red thread on. Your wrist faded now, frayed but still there, still yours. And as your eyelids grow heavier, as your limbs soften into the shape of rest, know this, you made it through, not because the madness vanished, but because you learned how to sit beside it, to listen without drowning, to breathe without breaking. The barber no longer watches you. As you sleep, he knows you don't need him to. The mirror reflects a face, and this time the face reflects you. Sleep well now, you've earned it.